Welcome back. US President Barack Obama is getting mixed reviews on his outreach to the Muslim world a year after he promised to repair ties in his Cairo speech. We're examining how he plans to answer his critics and build some confidence. For the discussion, I have Rashad Hussain, the US Special Envoy to the Organization of the Islamic Conference, the OIC. He's part of President Obama's efforts to revive relations between the US and Islamic nations. And we've got a caller on the line from the UK. Zubair, what would you like to ask?
First of all, assalamu alaikum to all of you brothers. I am of Pakistani origin. I am a chartered accountant by profession, and I am involved with one of the people who came from UK, from Pakistan, the educated Pakistanis, and there's such an extreme anger in everybody here that the response from America is such bad comparative to the...
Zubair, one thing I want to do, I realize you're talking about the Gaza flotilla again. I want to move on from that, but I want to get a response. Is it a battle to keep hearts and minds right now?
Well, our focus is not so much on this as a public diplomacy effort or to look at the polls and what people are thinking on any particular speech, but it's really a matter of implementing partnerships in all the areas that the president outlined, and we think that those partnerships have been productive, will continue to be productive, and that they'll continue to speak for themselves, and moving forward in all of the political areas which the president outlined in Cairo, where we think we've made a significant amount of progress.
Well, that's what I want to put a question to you that came in from Sufyan Bukir, who wrote in saying, President Obama had good intentions, but he got caught up in political reality. So in concrete terms, what has really been achieved in the past 12 months?
Well, if you go through the different areas that the president has talked about, I think there's been significant progress. There's always room for more to be done, and we will continue to work through this. But if you look at, for example, what the president said on Iraq, we're sticking to the timetable, we're sticking to the targets, the troop numbers in terms of 50,000 by the end of August and having the troops out by the end of next year, responsibly turning over the power in Afghanistan. The president, of course, has given us a long opportunity to continue to be persistent and work on the Middle East conflict by appointing Senator Mitchell on the second day and making a clear statement in Cairo, and continue to make a clear statement on settlements despite the recent events. We will continue to be persistent on those issues. The president also outlined partnerships in a number of areas. In education, we've tremendously increased educational exchanges by 30%. In the area of entrepreneurship, the president promised to have an entrepreneurship summit, and we had that summit as a part of our ongoing process in entrepreneurship, and Turkey has offered to host a summit next year. In the area of health, we have a major cooperation with Muslim countries on eradicating polio. The countries that are affected most by polio, that are the endemic countries, are Muslim countries, and we've seen a tremendous decline in those. We had a tremendous cooperation on H1N1 before the Hajj, when that threatened to become a global epidemic. We have our science envoys that are traveling throughout the Muslim world, and in the area of science, we've also established a global technology and innovation fund, which will invest potentially $2 billion and is one of OPIC's most popular offerings. And we've had a number of initiatives in interfaith dialogue. So all of this continues to implement the vision that the president laid out, and as we go forward, I think you'll see even further evidence of that.
The challenge you face is all the things you've mentioned here may be producing results, but they're not sort of the media headline hitting kind of things, and what people are seeing are the things that President Obama promised. Obviously the Afghanistan and Iraq, something people are waiting to see what happens excuse me, with the troop withdrawal. The Guantanamo Bay detention center closure was something everyone was expecting a much stronger move on, and that's one thing that I guess now President Obama has to answer for.
Well, we have made efforts continually to ensure that detainees are moved, and there's been a number of transfers. If you look at the numbers of transfer that have occurred over the last months and compare it to all the previous months and years combined, I think that's significant. There are, of course, difficulties involved in that. There are a group of terrorists there that, of course, need to be brought to justice, and there's always complications in the matter in which that's in the forms for which that's done and how that's going to be done. But we continue to move forward in all those cases and really continue to be persistent in looking at each detainee case by case and trying to resolve every single one of those. And it's still very much our intention to ensure that that closure occurs.
A lot of stories came out saying that many of these people had just been thrown in there. There wasn't really sort of any valid reason for them. To what degree is the president and the current administration having to untangle much of what happened during the previous administration, the Bush administration's time?
There's been a very careful review of all the detainee cases, and I think we've seen a movement in a tremendous amount of those cases. There's been a lot of detainees that have been transferred to other countries, and there's been detainees that are being brought to justice. And then there remains, of course, a group of detainees, which the president talked about last year. That's a very tough group, which are people that are, dedicated towards violence, and we must, continue to move forward on those cases as well. And we're committed to continue to doing that in a way in which we can resolve this as soon as possible.
Okay, let's get a call in. Mohammed in Saudi Arabia. Mohammed, what would you like to ask?
Yes, thanks for taking me on the air. I really watch your show with great interest. And this is the greatest. This is a very interesting topic. My question is that if Obama's what he said in the speech in Egypt, if he does go and develop a good relationship with a Muslim around the world, will that affect anything? The relationship with Israel and U.S. between. I'd like Mr. Hussain to address on this a little bit.
If there's any change in the relationship.
Well, as I've said, I think that it's very clear what's in the security interests of all the countries involved and of all the people, really, that are involved in the situation. That is to continue to move towards comprehensive peace that recognizes the rights and security of Israel and Palestine, and to continue to make sure that that happens as soon as possible, to continue to make sure that we continue with humanitarian aid. The United States, of course, is a tremendous donor of humanitarian aid to the Palestinians as well. And we feel that a solution to this conflict is in everyone's interest, and that includes the United States and Israel and Palestine.
To what extent do you buy into the idea many people put forward saying that it's American foreign policy overall that tends to generate the negativity which promotes the ideology of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban to target America, that if the policies changed, America would be less of a target, that really everyone's chasing their tail in this?
Well, I think what you've seen, especially over the last few years, is that the victims of terrorism have been Muslims. And how can you look at any aspect of American foreign policy and blame it when a Muslim goes into a mosque after a Friday prayer in Pakistan and kills other Muslims? And really, it's Muslims that have borne the brunt of the fatalities. And there's numbers at upwards of 80 to 85 to 90%. There's no foreign policy grievance that can ever justify killing an innocent person. And that certainly doesn't do anything to explain the fact that Muslims, more than anyone else, are being killed.
Absolutely, although in many cases the targets have been governments who've been associated with America, in the sense that they're accused of being in America's pocket. That happened in Pakistan. It's happened with attacks on Saudi Arabia. Anyone who's allied to America suddenly becomes a target too.
Well, I think you've seen, even just recently, the fact that it's often civilian Muslim targets, and it's Muslim civilians and men, women, and innocent children that are killed, and there's really no foreign policy grievance whatsoever that could justify any of that behavior, whether it's targeted towards civilians or it's targeted towards any of the groups that you mentioned.
And of course, they get caught in the middle of it. But I wonder to what degree the Muslim world has been responsive to President Obama's overtures. To what extent, 1 year after Cairo, has there been a positive response reciprocating? Because many people also feel the issue is that America doesn't get enough support in its efforts.
Well, I do think, throughout my travels, that there's been a tremendous response to the framework that the president laid out. There's been a tremendous response to the fact that the president wants to engage Muslim communities on all issues, not just areas of tension, but in all the areas that I mentioned. A tremendous response to the fact that the president made it clear that Islam is a part of the solution and not part of the problem when it comes to tackling violent extremism. A tremendous response to the fact that the president highlighted the contributions of Muslims not only to America, but to the entire world and to human civilization. And really, depending on where we go, I've met with delegates, for example, that have been involved in the Entrepreneurship Summit. There's been a tremendous response. I've met with people that have been involved in our efforts with regard to health and science. I've met with communities that are grateful that we continue our progress in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that the president has taken such a strong interest in reaching a solution to this Middle East conflict, which continues, as we've seen in the last day, to be such a source of tension.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick thought. You went to Brazil for the UN Alliance of Civilizations. I was there. We didn't get a chance to meet. Spain and Turkey pushed that initiative. The US seems to be coming more on board with that idea of getting involved at the UN Alliance.
Right. It's important and consistent with the message that the president had both in Cairo and in Ankara, where he mentioned the efforts of the Alliance of Civilization. And these types of initiatives and any initiatives that work towards increasing understanding between Muslim communities around the United States, Muslim communities and the United States, and all people around the world are efforts that you will see us supportive of.
Rashad Hussain, thank you very much for your time. I know it's busy for you right now, and thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us your feedback on the topics and post your questions and comments. On the next show, Brazil's Foreign Minister Cislo Amorim on the nuclear deal his country brokered between Turkey and Iran. He explains why he sees this as an important step forward between the West and the Islamic Republic and why it should not be ignored. Be sure to tune in for that from me and the team. We'll see you next time.